Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into one of the biggest, most exciting milestones for you and your baby, starting solid foods. We're going to break down the official guidelines to make it all feel a lot less stressful and a lot more fun. Let's get right into it.
So everything really starts with this one number, 1,000. And believe me, this isn't just a random number. It represents the first 1,000 days of your child's life, and it's probably the most important period for their growth.
So, what are these 1,000 days? Well, it's this incredibly critical window that stretches all the way from the start of your pregnancy to their second birthday. The nutrition they get during this time, especially when you start introducing solid foods, literally builds the foundation for their health for the rest of their lives.
So here's what we're going to cover in this explainer. We'll look at why 6 months is that magic number to start. We'll talk about what to feed your baby and, just as important, how to do it. Then we'll bust some common myths and wrap it all up with a super simple checklist. Sound good?
So first up, why is everyone so focused on 6 months? Why not 4 or 8? Well, it turns out timing is absolutely everything. Pediatricians actually call this the sensitive period for a reason. Let's get really clear on what we're talking about here. It's called complementary feeding for a reason. You're not replacing breast milk, not at all. You are complementing it. See, after 6 months, your baby is growing so fast that breast milk alone just isn't enough to cover all their nutritional needs. That's where these new foods come in to fill the gap.
So how do you know your baby is actually ready? Well, don't worry, they'll give you some pretty clear signals. Right around 6 months, you'll notice they can hold their head up nice and steady. Their little digestive system is finally mature enough to handle things like cereals. And that funny tongue thrust reflex, where they push everything out with their tongue, that starts to fade. They're basically looking at you and saying, okay, I'm ready for what's next.
Okay, so we've got the why and the when down pat. So let's move on to the really fun part, the what. What exactly should you be putting on that little spoon to build a super strong nutritional foundation? The most important concept to remember is balanced food. And it's simpler than it sounds. Basically, no single food has it all, right? So the goal is to mix and match ingredients from all the different food groups to create one powerhouse meal. Think of it like building with different colored blocks to make a strong tower. This is a perfect way to picture it. You need a good mix of everything. Some greens, some veggies, fruits, proteins, and of course, healthy fats. And this variety isn't just great for nutrition, it's also how you introduce your baby to all the amazing new tastes and textures the world has to offer. Okay, so let's get really practical. On the one hand, you have all these fantastic, simple homemade options. Things like khichdi, dal and rice, or just mashed up banana or potato. So easy and so good for them. But on the other hand, here's the stuff you really need to avoid, especially before they're 2. We're talking packaged foods, sugary juices, and definitely things like biscuits and chocolate. The goal is always fresh and homemade. All right, so we've covered the why and the what. Now let's talk about the how. This is all about the nitty-gritty. How much food, what should it feel like, and maybe most importantly, how to make mealtimes a happy, positive experience for everyone. Think of this chart as your roadmap for the next year or so. It lays it all out. You start small with just 2 or 3 tablespoons of mashed up food a couple of times a day. And then, as they grow, you slowly increase how often you feed them, how much you give them, and you start making the food chunkier, until, before you know it, they're eating chopped up versions of the family meal. And this right here is such a brilliant illustration of a super important detail, the consistency. If the food is too thin and watery, it just doesn't have enough energy for your growing baby. You're looking for that just right texture, thick enough that it drips slowly off the spoon. That's the good stuff. Now let's talk safety, because it is absolutely everything. These 4 steps, they're non-negotiable. Always, always wash your hands. Use clean bowls and spoons. Serve the food as fresh as possible. And please, try to avoid feeding bottles for solids. They can be really hard to get perfectly clean, and they can easily become a place for germs to grow. But feeding is about so much more than just calories and vitamins. It's about the experience. This idea of responsive feeding is key. It just means you pay attention to your baby. You watch for their hunger cues, and you stop when they tell you they're full. It's about creating this positive, loving time together with no distractions like the TV or phones, and definitely no force feeding, ever. Okay, now for a really fun part. Let's tackle some of those myths and old wives' tales you're bound to hear from well-meaning friends and relatives. It's time to separate fact from fiction. I am almost certain you've heard this one, right? This idea that some foods are hot and some are cold, and that things like bananas or curd can give your child a cold. It's a really common belief. But let's be really clear. The fact is, this is just not true. Modern medicine has no concept of hot or cold foods. Actually, things like bananas and curd are packed with nutrients and are a fantastic part of a healthy, balanced diet for your little one.
Okay, here's another classic. The fear that ghee, or other fats, are just too heavy for a baby's stomach, and that they'll cause a cough or other issues.
And you guessed it, that is also a myth. In fact, healthy fats are a super important source of energy for babies. Their brains and bodies are growing so fast. Adding just a little bit of ghee or oil to their food is a great way to boost the energy content, and let's be honest, it makes it taste better too. Whew, we've covered a lot of ground. So let's bring it all home and wrap up with a final, simple checklist of the most important principles to remember. This is your cheat sheet for success. So here are your big do's. Keep on breastfeeding. Stick with homemade, fresh food whenever you can. Introduce new foods one at a time to check for any reactions. Add a little healthy fat for energy. Watch and respect your child's appetite. And remember, keep the food thick and semi-solid, not watery. And just as important, here are your don'ts. Don't wait too long after 6 months to start. Say no to packaged junk foods and feeding bottles. Make mealtimes a screen-free zone. Never, ever force feed. And always be really careful about choking hazards like whole nuts or grapes. At the end of the day, starting solid food is so much bigger than just nutrition. It really is a journey of discovery for your baby and for you. It's about bonding, learning, and love. So the only question left is, are you ready to make your mealtimes amazing?